Imagine that you're looking at an AP Bio FRQ number 2 and you think to yourself, wait, what graph do I make? That moment is real. You understand the data, but you're having a hard time deciding which type of graph to construct. Hi, I'm Miss Parrott, and in today's video, that's what we're going to get into, choosing the right graph. I'm going to help you make making that decision a lot easier. Remember, the whole point of a graph is to take a bunch of numbers in a data table that on their own look like a bunch of bleh, and turn it into a picture that actually makes sense to your brain. It's going to allow you to see a pattern or a trend in your data, to answer your investigation question, and to support your claim with evidence from the graph. So the first thing you got to do is think about your variables. So what's going to go on your x-axis and then what's going to go on your y-axis. Because whatever's on your x-axis is going to determine the type of graph you make. So what goes on our x is whatever is changed, selected, compared, or however we're going to organize our data. All right. This, if it's an experiment, is also going to be our independent variable. And if we think about a graph as the visualization of a cause and effect relationship, then this is the thing that's going to cause whatever we see on the y-axis. So the y-axis is what's measured, our dependent variable, and it's the effect or the result of whatever's happening along the x-axis. So if we have this simple data table where we have 3 different levels of light intensity and then plant height, well, which is the thing that's measured? Well, we're measuring plant height as a result of our different low, medium, and high light intensities. So we would have this as low, medium, high. On the x-axis, that's our light intensity, and then plant height, that's the thing we're measuring, would go on the y. But now that we know what goes on the x, what's next? One thing that a lot of teachers assume students know or rush through is the difference between categorical and continuous data. And so we're going to take some time on that today. All right, categorical data is just labels or groups, data that you can categorize together. So like different species, treatment groups, right? Like control versus experimental, habitats, genotypes, etc. Even if you name something group 1, that's a group, that's a categorical data set. Now, then there's continuous, which is when you're measuring something along a scale. Something like time, temperature, pH, or mass. So these are often numerical, but not all numbers are continuous. We'll get into the exceptions at the end, so stick around to the end for the tricks. Ask yourself, is the x-axis data categorical or is it continuous? We're going to break it down. If it is categorical, you're going to look at 3 different types of graphs. You could, so don't forget categorical, these are groups, labels, treatments, species, habitats, genotypes, conditions, etc. You could do a bar graph, a box and whisker plot, or a pie chart. Which one of these you choose is going to depend on the kinds of variables you have and what kind of pattern you're trying to show. So in a bar graph, and this is an example of one, you're going to use this to compare one value, the mean of a group of measurements, or even percents across several categories or groups like these. You will often see in AP Biology error bars on these, on bars, especially if the bar is representing a mean. So if it's the average of something, you'll usually see an error bar on there as well. A box and whisker plot And this was new. This is new to some folks, and we're going to actually do a whole video on box and whisker plots. But for now, just know that we're going to use these to compare the median of a data set, quartiles, and the spread or variation. In this case, the whiskers often get mixed up for error bars, but that's not what that is, okay? Whiskers are there to show your maximum value and your minimum value, not your error. Again, we're going to have a whole video later in this series on that. Click here at some point to find it. And then finally, a pie chart. We got a different category in each wedge. And here we're comparing categories as part of a whole out of a total of 100%. So depending on what pattern you're going for, you're going to choose the chart type, the graph type that makes sense for you. But what if my data is continuous? Well, if your x-axis data is continuous, meaning it's a type of measurement across a scale like time, temperature, pH, concentration, distance, mass, something, again, along any kind of numerical scale, you might want to look at using a line graph, a scatter plot, or a histogram. Now, line graphs are used to show change across time or any ordered value. So again, this could be pH, distance, etc. On a line graph, your dots are clearly connected, and sometimes you'll see error bars on a line graph as well. A scatter plot is not the same as a line graph. Do not get these twisted. Okay, we use a scatter plot when there may be a possible relationship between two numerical variables. Now, note, in this case, actually in scatter plot and histogram, the x value is not showing an independent variable of an experiment. Okay, we're looking at something different. In this case, we just have two sets of numbers, two sets of measurements, and we're trying to see how they're related. A lot of times you're going to have a line of best fit that shows a trend among the data. And a scatter plot may have more than one y value for each x value. And that's okay in this scenario. Then you've got a histogram. Now, a histogram looks a lot like a bar graph, but it's not. In a bar graph, the bars are separated and you have categorical data. In this one, your x-axis, each section is a range. It's a numerical range of a scale. So like 0 to 20, 21 to 40, 41 to 60. And then your y-axis is always simply like a count or frequency or quantity. It's like how many are in each range group. So, and also the bars are stuck together. They're not separated because they're not separate groups. So here we're going to use a histogram if we're looking at the distribution of one numerical variable divided among intervals. And again, in this case, the x is just different ranges. It's not an independent variable. And again, in this case, the bars will touch. Sometimes you see a line to show a trend as well. Now, there are a couple of other sort of surprise or not, unique situations. You may see a log scale graph where either on the x or the y, your numbers, so say your data set is so huge, like the range is so gigantic by like powers of 10 that you need to have a log scale. And in that case, you may have like each interval is actually 10 times the previous interval. So you're just going to use this, or usually see this, when your values span a very huge range. The whole point is just to get it to all fit on one page, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to see all the data together. And it illustrates the differences between the highest and lowest points in a data set. You may also see a dual y-axis graph. These are kind of fun. So in this case, you have two y-axes, and what they have in common is their x-axis. So they would share the same x-axis, but if your y's have different units, they're different variables with different units, but they have a common x-axis, you can actually draw them on the same graph. And so in this one, I've got like percent of population infected, that's in blue. So that data, as years go on, right, that increased and then decreased. And then in red, I had the relative population size, which started high, went low, and then went high again. And then maybe, depending on what your trends are, you can make some relationship or not, again, depending on the data, between these two variables. Now, one big warning, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, you gotta watch out for groups with numerical labels. Okay, because let's say, for instance, you got plant height on the y and 1 month, 2 months, 3 months on the x. What kind of graph do you make? Well, we don't know. You got to know more about the experiment, because not every graph with time is automatically a line graph. So if you measured the same plants over time, you measured them at 1 month of growth, 2 months of growth, and 3 months of growth, the same plant and how it grew over time, that would be a line graph, because that time is continuous. If though you had a whole group of plants, or you had 3 groups of plants, and the first group you allowed to grow for 1 month and measured it and then put it to the side. The other one you let grow for 2 months, then you measured that group and then put those to the side, and had another group, let it grow for 3 months to see how high it would grow. That's 3 separate groups. You're not measuring the same plants over time, you're measuring 3 separate groups, so then that's gonna be a bar graph. So just because you see a numerical label doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna have a continuous graph. So be careful as you read to be sure you're choosing the right one. So let's sum it up. The first thing we do, identify our x-axis variable, right? Our cause or our organizing variable. Then determine, is it a categorical one or is it continuous? If it's categorical, depending on the pattern we need to show, we might choose a bar, a box and whisker, or a pie chart. And if we want a continuous one, or if our data is continuous, we might choose a line graph, a scatter plot, or a histogram. Determining which types of data will result in what type of graph is a skill that needs practice. And if you're not sure about all this yet, that's okay. You're just learning. So you have to practice, and AP style practice is what gets you to fluency, which is gonna help you when you open that FRQ2 on the AP exam and you know exactly which type of graph to draw. If you found this video helpful, please do give it a like. Subscribe to my channel for more graphing videos, more videos on AP Bio, math, and quantitative skills. If you want, please leave a comment, a question, or an emoji down below. And if you want resources or AP style practice on graphing, please do check out my Teachers Pay Teachers store, Know and Grow with Gnomes. I have tons of graph analysis practice, and I'm going to be making even more that go specifically with this Graphing Foundations series. Keep learning, keep growing, and we'll see you next time.